I heard a story recently that I have really been thinking about, a true story. And in light of Chenrezig Hall, boy, it's cavernous in here, you can hear it. In light of being in this new space, and especially the beautiful new images of Kuan Yin and Buddha that are in this space, it's made me think that about the long-term impact of our practice, especially the practice of virtue, that we have no idea what kind of influence that has in the universe. It's an amazing story about interdependence to me. So I'll start in this century. Someone I know who lives in the Northwest is a Dharma student. At the time of her birth, she was born with a cleft palate and a hair lip. So, the upper part of the palate is missing and the lip is open, which entails surgery from very, very early in your life. I think this person has had something like a dozen surgeries between the time she was born to the time she was fully grown, so 18 or 20. And so that's really a strong influence that would mark your life. There's the thing of being in and out of the hospital and how that is, and especially in the days that she was in and out of the hospital, your parents couldn't stay with you overnight. You're just a kid there alone, dealing with your pain and your whatever by yourself. Often, especially, maybe it's not so much so today, but there's scarring that's involved with that, so that, this person and people who have this often have a self-consciousness about the appearance that comes from the surgery. So it really is a life marker in a person's life. So I want to back up then about 1,200 years. On the island of Sumatra, in what is now Indonesia, someone, it's unknown who actually did this, but clearly it was someone part of the ruling dynasty, but they were inspired by faith in the Buddha to build a monument to the Buddha's teachings that we know today as Borobudur in Indonesia. It's enormous. I didn't write down the dimensions, but this thing is huge, and it has blocks and you ascend these stairs, you go up and up and up, and then at the top there's 3 concentric circles. And on this, around these blocks, there are 2,672 relief panels that are carved into the stone that depict the story of the Buddha's life. There's a section that depicts cause and effect and the law of karma. So the Buddha's teachings are like in stone on this monument. And the idea is that as the person walks up, they get this education and kind of a purification. They go through all the stages of the path until on the top there are 504 Buddha images that are pretty much life-size, facing different directions, and some are inside stupas. I mean, it's magnificent. It took probably 75, 80 years to build, they think. And then around somewhere between 11th and 13th centuries, Buddhism died out in Indonesia, and so it was no longer really in use. Kind of was taken back over by the jungle. And then in the mid-19th century or so, 1814, early 19th century, Sir Thomas Raffles was the British colonial governor of that island and heard about it and got excited about it and began to... I don't know if he actually started to restore the monument, but it got some world attention. So eventually it became a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and there was a major renovation of the site in 1975 and then another one in 1982. So who knows? There had to have been armies of carvers doing this work under the auspices of this series of rulers. Completely forgotten. Nobody knows who they are. Well, about 10, 12 years ago, a British man living in Hong Kong went with his wife on vacation to this event, to this monument to Borobudur. He is not a Buddhist, but he is involved in healing practices. So he has kind of a connection with spiritual things. He saw in one of these what do they call those? Anyway, one of these depictions of the Buddha's life and the Buddha's teachings. There's this whole section, as I mentioned, on karma. And there's one on the 10 destructive actions, where it shows the act and the result, and the act and the result, and the act and the result. There also appears to be people healing each other. At least that's the description that was given by the guide. But right next to the healing part, which this fellow was most interested in, was a depiction of all of these beings with deformed mouths and deformed kind of faces. And the guy who was giving them the guided tour showed that this shows that the result of gossip and bad speech is to have this physical deformity of the mouth and the face. So this fellow from Britain living in Hong Kong, who was with this doing this healing work, was so taken with his experience of Borobudur that he wrote a little article for a national magazine and submitted that. Well, the person that I started the story with, the person who was born with a cleft palate and hair lip, was one of the editors of that magazine. She read this story. It has one sentence in it that describes one of the actions that is depicted here is the action of gossip and harsh speech that results in mutilated faces. And she stopped. She said that sentence changed her life. She said, I looked back over my life, and have I been engaged in idle gossip or talking about other people my whole life? She says, a habit I have always had. And by reading this article and looking simply at the cause and effect result depicted on this monument 1,200 years ago, reported by a guy 1,200 years later, to this reader, she stopped. Then, done. No more. No more gossip, no more talking about other people behind their back. Because she knew, even though she was not much of a Buddhist at that time, she subsequently has come to know the Buddhist teachings very well, but at that time, the very idea that a karmic result could be so powerful that that would be the cause of her experience in this life. And it was vivid. So, who knows who to thank? Right? That person's long dead, long gone. Whoever decided it, who have designed it, long dead, long gone. The carvers, long dead, long gone. Could have been actually this person, for all we know. But the effect of that virtuous action, the effect of that sharing the Dharma, who knows how many other people it's touched too, but for hundreds of years, the ripple effect of that act going forward, going forward, going forward, going forward, until, boom, it lands in her mind ripe to receive it, and this person stops creating that particular destructive action. Overcomes a lives-long habit. To me, this is astonishing. And it just illustrates how, as I started out to say, we don't know where our virtuous actions go. We don't know where our destructive actions go either. But I want to stay with the virtuous ones today. We don't know the effect of the things that we set in motion when we have our mind in the Dharma, when we share the Buddha's teachings, when we live the Buddha's teachings, when we change our own minds. What kind of effect does that have on the people around us? So it's just an inspiration to be conscious and conscientious about creating virtue, and recognizing that it's not just for ourselves that we do that. That it has an effect in the long term, and sometimes that gets a little theoretical. But sometimes we can take a story like this one and see that a 1,200-year-old act can have such profound effect in someone's life. Is really amazing. And we benefit from that all the time. That we even have the Dharma today is from acts just like that. So may we also cultivate a real gratitude for that, and be conscious about what we do.